a galaxy far, far away, lived revolutionary men like none other. We call them the leaders of the scientific revolution. All right, kids, we got a lot to cover. Let's get this show on the road. All right, so looking back in time here, we got the way people used to look at things. That is the geocentric theory, which started all with a man named Aristotle saying that the Earth was the center of the universe. That was expanded by a man named Ptolemy, and saying that, God put the Earth at the center, and these ideas were upheld by the church and ancient scholars. But as we move into the scientific revolution, we have a heliocentric theory come around, in which it states, of course, that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and that was discovered by Copernicus. Alright, kids, so during these dog days of the scientific revolution, we had this thing called the scientific method that came to be, thanks to a couple of very important guys, one by the name of Francis Bacon and the other René Descartes. These two guys were leaders, pioneers like none other. They decided they would find ways to gain scientific knowledge through experimentation, and they placed a very important emphasis on reasoning. So thanks to these two ideas, we have come to the modern way of scientific methods that are used today for observations, experiments, and to obtain understanding of the natural world. Now that I've given you this great information, somebody please throw me a bone here. Johannes Kepler worked under Tycho Brahe, a Danish astronomer. They observed and tracked the measurements of Mars' orbit. Thus Kepler became the first to prove that planets orbit the sun in an oval or elliptical pattern. Hello there, I'm Gigi the Parrot, here to tell you about Galileo Galilei, my owner, and an Italian scientist / astronomer. He is the man who you can thank for improving the telescope and for being the first to discover rings on Saturn, craters on the moon, sunspots, and the moons of Jupiter. He also discovered the Milky Way is made up of lots of stars, and was later persecuted by the church for his findings, since they disagreed with what they believed. Andreas Vesalius was a doctor that expanded the realm of anatomy during the 1500s. He dissected many bodies while hiring artists to sketch what they saw. His findings led to how the human heart works, and Antony Leeuwenhoek developing the microscope. Alright, kids, now let's move on to the Enlightenment. The scientific revolution led to, literally, a revolution in the way people think. Thus, we have the Enlightenment, or the Age of Reason, where people began realizing knowledge is power. John Locke, an English philosopher, believed people were naturally happy, tolerant, and reasonable. He said, though, that people were born with equal rights of life, liberty, and property. He also stated the purpose of the government was to protect those rights, and if the government failed, then it should be overthrown. Hey, kids, George Washington here. With all this talk about revolution, let's move on to the one that affects you the most, the American Revolution.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
It was almost like destiny drove the colonists to the U.S., and from there we have the British government placing lots of acts and taxes upon the colonists, mainly the Stamp Act, which was a direct tax saying it had to be paid straight to the government. Things such as playing cards, wills, newspapers, etc. received these taxes. with the colonists standing up to all these acts and taxes in many different ways. The British then retaliated on their own on March 5th, 1770, when a crowd of 50 or so men and boys were gathered outside. They taunted the British soldiers by throwing snowballs with rocks and sticks in them, and the British soldiers opened fire, killing 5 men. This became known as the Boston Massacre. With things leaning ever so closer to a revolt, December 16th, 1773 was no exception, with the Boston Tea Party, when at the signal of Sam Adams, a group of colonists dressed as Mohawk Indians attacked the Boston harbor, throwing 342 chests of tea into the harbor worth $75,000. After 10 years of taxes and acts piling up, the colonists were fed up, and in April of 1776 they began wanting their independence, which is granted thanks to the signing of the Declaration of Independence in July 4th, 1776, with 3 purposes: justify the Revolution, notify the world and Britain that they were free, and state the principles on which the nation was founded. The Declaration of Independence has 4 main parts: the preamble, which is the introduction; the Declaration of Rights; the list of grievances, which are complaints; and a formal resolution for independence. Well, guys and gals, that's all the time we have today. I couldn't cover everything in the video, so make sure you look up Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Thomas Hobbes, and Robert Boyle, just so you know that stuff for your quiz. I look forward to next week's lesson, and make sure you can remember the secret word for the week, which is leprechaun, like the hat I'm wearing. Have a good one. Bye-bye.